MMA is by far the most violent sport the world has ever seen, and violence is exactly what fans are hoping to see when they tune in. But every now and then a fighter suffers an injury so bad that fans can't help but to look away from their screens. We're counting down the most gruesome injuries in the history of mixed martial arts. Current UFC light heavyweight champion Jamal Hill has a 12-1 record, with his one defeat coming in pretty disturbing fashion. Back in 2021, he faced Scottish submission specialist Paul Craig in the first big test of his young career. Craig wanted nothing to do with Hill's hands and managed to scramble to the ground on their first exchange, where he immediately started attacking submissions. Craig quickly locked Hill's left arm in a tight hook and rolled him over into an inescapable armbar. All he could do was sit and watch as Paul Craig snapped his arm at the elbow in one of the grossest injuries you will ever see. But the most insane part is that he didn't even consider tapping. Craig actually let go of the lock to celebrate after he heard the bone snap, but quickly realized Hill was still fighting and had to ground and pound his one-armed opponent through the canvas to earn not a submission, but a TKO stoppage. After suffering his first defeat inside the UFC octagon in one of the most shocking knockouts of all time, Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman were set to run it back for the middleweight strap at UFC 163. Silva was hungry to prove that his previous defeat was a fluke, but it was Weidman that scored first blood. After almost finishing the fighter in the first round, Weidman came out swinging in the second. Silva responded with a quick leg kick, which Weidman was able to check. Silva's leg broke in grotesque fashion, sending him plummeting to the ground in agony. And unfortunately for Anderson, the injury signaled the beginning of the end of one of the greatest careers in UFC history. But what no one could have predicted was that just 5 years later, Weidman would suffer the exact same injury in the first round of his fight at UFC 261. The good news is that Weidman has made a full recovery, and he's booked to make his return to the octagon against Brad Tavares once and for all. Polish superstar and former strawweight queen Joanna Jedrzek is beloved by fight fans for her exceptional striking skills, her infectious personality, and her unbreakable spirit. At UFC 248, Joanna took on Wei Li for the strawweight title in what is widely regarded as the greatest women's fight in UFC history. But while fans were treated to an all-out war in the octagon, Joanna took an inhumane amount of damage. As the rounds passed and Wei Li started to really find her rhythm, a startling transformation began to unfold on Joanna's face. After a solid right hand from Zhang, a hematoma began to develop on Joanna's forehead, growing larger and larger as the fight progressed. By the end of the contest, her forehead had swelled to an alarming size, and she was looking like a full-blown alien.
From the third round, the swollenness was bothering me, and I felt it was just getting more and more swollen, and my head was like, going on and off.
The Polish star was forced to take over 2 years off following the fight, and when she returned to rematch Wei Li, she was nowhere near the same fighter she once was and was forced to retire after her second consecutive loss to the strawweight queen. Fighting legend Antonio Nogueira, better known as Minotaurem or just Big Nog, suffered one of the most horrifying injuries fight fans have ever seen when he faced off against Frank Mir at UFC 140. The heavyweight clash started out evenly, with both fighters landing blows and attempting to impose their respective game plans. However, things took a turn for the worse when Mir, one of the world's most lethal submission artists, managed to trap Nogueira's arm in a Kimura lock. The relentless pressure from Mir was too much, and in a gut-wrenching moment, Nogueira's arm audibly snapped. However, Frank Mir can't have felt too bad about it because this isn't the only arm he broke during his UFC career. The famed heavyweight champ who famously submitted Brock Lesnar in one of the nastiest knee bars ever also broke the arm of fellow legend Tim Sylvia when they faced off in 2004. So basically, if you ever see Frank Mir, just don't let him near you. It's honestly not worth the risk. Heavyweight champ Jon Jones requires no introduction. However, he is proof that even goats are not immune to a painful toll this incredible sport can exact on the human body. In his fight against the undefeated and undisputed Chael Sonnen, Jones experienced one of the gnarliest foot injuries we've ever seen. But in classic Jon Jones fashion, he didn't even acknowledge it until after he secured the victory, because he probably just doesn't even feel pain. From the opening bell, Jones was dominant. He overpowered Sonnen with his unique blend of striking and wrestling and cruised to a first-round victory. But while he didn't take a ton of damage from Chael, he still wound up in the hospital that night. At some point in their brief one-round fight, Jones's toe was horribly dislocated, with the bone gruesomely protruding through his skin. Jones demonstrated an almost superhuman ability to withstand pain. However, the impact of the injury has lingered throughout his career. Right before entering the cage for his heavyweight debut against Ciryl Gane, Jones and UFC staff got into an argument about the medical tape on his foot and actually had him remove some of the taping he had done for that fight.
And when I got out there, the commission was just like, you can't tape your feet. And I'm like, dude, I've always taped my feet. I'm not gonna compete if I can't tape my toes. I just won't do it. I want everyone to know that for the future. So thank God we didn't have a disaster out there tonight.
In the main event of UFC 264, Conor McGregor met Dustin Poirier for the third time to settle their heated rivalry once and for all. After suffering a TKO loss to Poirier just 6 months prior, the Mac was looking to take his opponent's head clean off. However, Poirier was ready for the Irishman's onslaught and stood his ground. The Diamond matched Conor's striking hit for hit and made it abundantly clear they were not an even match on the ground. But while the Notorious survived the early barrage, he wouldn't get a chance to flip the script. Late in the first round, as McGregor stepped back to reset, his ankle twisted unnaturally underneath him, sending him crumbling to the canvas in agony. Fans watched in disbelief as the sport's biggest star writhed in pain.
This is not over. If we have to take this outside with him, it's all outside. We don't give a.
In a shocking turn of events, however, and most definitely with no help from any banned substances, McGregor appears to have made a full recovery. The Mac is expected to return against Michael Chandler sometime in early 2024, as long as USADA doesn't get in their way. Evangelista Cyborg Santos, the ex-husband of MMA legend Chris Cyborg, suffered possibly the most traumatic injury in the history of mixed martial arts at the hands of British striking sensation Michael "Venom" Page at Bellator 158. The fight was intense from the get-go, but it was abundantly clear MVP's speed and length would be a problem for Cyborg. Page would ultimately end the fight in dramatic fashion with one of the most vicious flying knees ever. MVP launched into the air and connected with Santos' forehead in a blow so powerful that it literally fractured Santos' skull. The now viral images were nothing short of chilling, showing a clear dent in Santos' skull from the sheer force of Page's strike. And while Santos has made a full recovery, doctors initially feared that the fracture to his skull and subsequent swelling could have very easily taken his life that night. If you've ever wondered how UFC fighters spend their hard-earned cash, check this video right here to see some of the most insane purchases made by fighting legends.